Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and in this video we are gonna do a basic VLAN configuration home lab. So the objective for this home lab is to set up a network with 4 VLANs, including a voice VLAN with a core switch and 2 access switches. So the prerequisites for this home lab is packet tracer and of course basic understanding of networking concepts. I'm not going to explain the concepts in detail, especially what a VLAN is and what's the purpose of using VLANs. Okay, so here is the overview of how our home lab is going to look like when we are done. These are all the devices that we are going to use and all of the subnets and VLANs. Also, if you want to follow along this home lab, I prepared a PDF file in the website. You can check it out at eastcharmer.com and you can go to resources in here and go to the networking folder, and it's called the basic VLAN setup home lab, and this is the step-by-step instructions on how to do the home lab with the configuration and the commands. So if you're interested in this home lab, you can check out this PDF instructions in here. And if you're interested in the real-world explanation and why we are using core switches, access switches, and voice VLAN, then you can keep on watching. And without further ado, let's get started with today's video. Okay, so after opening Packet Tracer, the first step that we're gonna do is to add the devices to the workspace. And in our home lab activity setup, we are gonna have 5 PCs, 2 IP phones, and 3 switches. 2 for access switch and 1 for core switch. So let's go ahead and add our end devices first, which are the 5 PCs. So just drag and drop them in here. Next is 2 IP phones. So it's also under the end devices and it's just called the IP phone. Drag one and place it next to PC1 and drag another one and place it next to PC2. Next is our network devices. Let's just use the 2960 switches. So let's drag 3 of them. Let's place one on this side, another one on this side, and one on top, which is going to serve as our core switch. Okay, so next step is to physically connect the devices and just follow the PDF if you want to do this home lab activity on which devices to connect. So we're just going to go to the connections area and select copper straight through cable in here, and let's get started with the first PC. So let's just connect this from fast Ethernet 0 to the first switch, and let's just do fast Ethernet 1 in here. Just organize it, arrange it properly so you can see all the devices. It's up to you how you want it to look as long as it's properly connected. Let's connect all of this together. Next is fast Ethernet 02 for IP phone, and select switch in here because you want to connect the IP phone to the switch. And then connect the IP phone again to the PC because it's gonna give the network connection to the PC. And as you can notice in here, we are getting red lights for the IP phone. That's because we have to physically or manually turn it on in Packet Tracer. So what we're gonna do is to click on the IP phone in here, and as you can see, you can zoom it in so you can see it in here. So right now it's not plugged into anything, so it's easier to just use the phone adapter in here and just connect it. It's like turning it on, and as you can see now the lights are green. So now let's go ahead and connect our other IP phone to the switch. So I'm gonna connect it to fast Ethernet 06 because later on we are gonna configure it with the range method, and usually we just assign the different switch ports in order if we are doing 2 VLANs or different VLANs on the switches, just to make it organized. Okay, so as you can see, same thing about the IP phone. You just have to manually power it on. So you would see the lights turning green in here. And now let's connect the phone to our PC so it can get the data network later. And just do the rest to the other devices in here. Just connect all of them. And now we have the 2 access switch in here. We want to connect it to our core switch in here, and we are gonna use our gigabit Ethernet port in here. instead of the fast Ethernet as the uplink for our access switch to our core switch, because this cable in here is gonna carry all of the VLANs and it's gonna be the trunk port, and this port in here is gonna be the trunk port, so we are selecting gigabit Ethernet instead of the fast Ethernet. And just wait for a few minutes before everything turns green. And now we have this setup. Okay, let's review how access and core switches work. You can skip this if you just want to do the Homelab. Core switches are the backbone of the network, and they're responsible for fast data routing and switching between access switches and other parts of the network. They also serve as a central point for traffic coming from multiple access switches, like our layout in this Homelab. Access switches are the first point of entry for end devices into the network. These switches connect devices like computers, printers, phones, and other endpoint devices to the network. And they also usually handle traffic within local VLANs. So here's a real-world example of how access and core switches work together. Imagine a company with multiple floors. On each floor, there are access switches that connect end-user devices such as computers, printers, and phones, and these switches handle local network traffic on the floor like file sharing or voice traffic for IP phones. Also, each access switch on each floor is connected via uplinks to a core switch located in the server room or data center. Then, the core switch aggregates all the traffic coming from all these floors and routes it between different floors, departments, and also to external networks like the internet. So before we get started configuring all of our devices in here, one tip that I can give you when you are doing home labs like this is to think of the IP address that you're gonna use to make it easier to configure the commands after. Okay, so we are gonna do the labels for the VLAN first. So we have a guide on what VLAN to add later when we are configuring. So let's type all of the VLAN that we are gonna use. Also, I'd like to add the network address for every VLAN that we're going to use, because we are going to have a different network address for every VLAN. So it's going to be easier for us to know what to test later on, what computers should communicate with each other, and what network address or IP address we're going to assign to every computer. So I'm just going to add a class C IP address in here, like 192.168.168.10.0/24 for our VLAN 10 in here. This is for our VLAN 20, and 192.168.30.0. This is for our VLAN 30 for the IT department. So each department and each VLAN has different network address, and also you're free to use whatever IP address you want. If you want to use class A or class B, that's up to you. So it doesn't really matter. You don't really have to follow this IP address strictly. So the next thing I want to add is the IP address that we're gonna assign our individual PC in here. Since we are not doing DHCP on this home lab, we're gonna do that on the next lab. We are gonna assign static IP for now to test the communication between our computers. So I'm just gonna add IP address based on their network address. So for this PC, it belongs to VLAN 10. So I'm just gonna use 192.168.10.2 for example, because .1 is usually gonna be the default gateway, reserved for default gateway. This one, the next PC is also gonna be VLAN 10. So 192.168.10.3. It's a static IP. Then this one is gonna be the VLAN 20. So let's do 192.168.20.2. It's following the correct and appropriate network address in here for VLAN 20. For IT VLAN, let's do 192.168.30.2, and the next PC would be 192.168.30.3. Okay, so now we can get started configuring. So the next step would be to configure our core switch. Let's start from the top in here. So this is going to be our core switch where the access switches are connected to. So of course, we're going to go to your command in here, and nothing is configured so far. So let's just do enable in here to get to our next prompt, and let's do a conf.t so we can do our configuration. So the first thing that we want to do is to change the host name so it's not going to be confusing when we are going through the different switches. Let's just give it an appropriate host name, and I'm just going to call it core switch, but it's up to you on whatever you want to call it. It's just easier this way to make it more organized and troubleshooting later. And the next thing is to create all the VLANs for your network. So we have 4 in here, so let's just do VLAN 10, and the name of the VLAN name is office. Let's do the next VLAN, VLAN 20, and name it HR, and then VLAN 30, name is IT, then VLAN 40, and name is voice. Okay, so to verify if all the VLANs were created, let's just do the show command, show VLAN brief in here. So as you can see, we have created the different VLANs in here. After creating the VLANs, the next step would be to configure the trunk ports on the core switch. So we have 2 trunk ports in here because we have 2 access switches connected to it. So to make it easier, we are gonna do this command and range if you are doing 2 or more interfaces. So you don't have to keep doing them individually if they have the same configuration. So the command should be int range GIO1 up to 2, and then we're now on the interface configuration, and let's do a switch port mode because we want to change our mode to trunk. And then if we just look into the options here by typing question mark, you can see that you can change the mode into 3 different options in here: access, dynamic, and trunk. We're gonna do trunk in here because it's gonna carry all the other VLANs. So now we have switched it to trunk, and then we're gonna do this command next, which is switch port trunk allowed VLANs, and we are gonna specify all the VLANs that we're allowing on this trunk port. So since we are doing 4 VLANs, I'm just gonna do all in here. Don't forget to type VLAN first and then all. So it's just allowing all of the VLANs that we have created. If you just want to specify a few of them, you can just add them individually, like 10, VLAN 20, VLAN 30. But then if you have so many VLANs, you can just do the all command. Okay, and don't forget to save it, of course. Okay, so let's now go to our access switches in here, and the next step is to configure the VLANs on this access switch. So I'll do this first, and just like the core switch, we are going to change the host name for this. So let's do an enable conf.t in here, and then let's do host name access switch 1, for example. Okay, so let's go to our VLAN configuration now, and let's do just the VLANs that we want to use for this switch. So for this switch, we are just going to do VLAN 10, VLAN 20 in here, and since we have phones in here, we're also going to do the voice VLAN. So best practice usually in the workplace, as much as possible, is to narrow down the VLANs to only the VLANs that you're gonna use for that switch. For example, if your company has like 100 VLANs total and that switch is only gonna use 10 VLANs, just limit the switch to what VLAN it needs, and don't add all the unnecessary VLANs that are never gonna get used, because it's easier to troubleshoot it that way also. Okay, so let's do VLAN 10, 20, and 40 in this access switch 1. So just like the core switch, let's do the command VLAN 10 name office. Then you don't have to exit this mode, and you can go on to the next VLAN. So VLAN 20 name HR, then our voice VLAN, which is VLAN 40, and name voice. So now you can exit and verify if you have created all the VLANs in here by doing the command show VLAN brief. So okay, we also have all of the VLANs in here. Next step is to configure our trunk port, because our gigabit interface in here would also serve as a trunk port for the core switch because it's connected to our core switch in here. So let's just check the interface just to make sure that we are gonna get into our interface. So you can just hover into this to quickly check the interface number. So it's gig 01. So let's do this command int gig 01, and we need to put space, of course, and let's do switch port mode trunk in here, and same command, let's add all the VLANs that we want to allow to pass through this trunk port. So let's do the trunk allowed VLAN, and that's only allow the VLANs that we have created in here. So let's just do the 3 VLANs, which are 10, 20, and 40. Okay. So next step is to assign the access and voice ports to VLAN 10 office computers. So earlier we have set up our layout to make this first 2 PC in here our office computers. So to make it easier for you to visualize everything when configuring, you can also add or draw shapes in here, just like this one for example, and just add a fill color to make it easier to distinguish different networks or different departments in here. Okay, so this computers we are gonna assign to VLAN 10. This computer in here to VLAN 20. This computers in here is for VLAN 30. Okay, so usually, for example, this switch is gonna be used for 2 VLANs. So since this is a 24 port switch, we can just divide our switches. We can just divide our switch port to different VLANs in here. So the next command will be to assign ports to VLAN 10 for the following computers. So let's do this command and then range, because we want to just do this configuration on many switch ports. So for this example, we're just gonna do 5 ports. The first 5 ports is for VLAN 10. The next 5 ports is for VLAN 20, just as an example in here. So let's do an FA001-5, which means that it's from port 1 to port 5. And then let's do this command switch port mode, just like earlier we did this but with the trunk port. Now we are gonna do this for the access port because it's gonna be an access port this time. So let's do this command. So now it's an access port. Let's now assign the VLAN by using this command, port access VLAN number. So we're gonna do VLAN 10 for this computers in here. And also because there's an IP phone in here that's connected, we also want to use the voice VLAN for this so that the voice data can pass through this switch port, not just the data. So let's do the voice instead of access in here and do the VLAN number for the voice VLAN, which is 40. So that's the command we're gonna use if we have an IP phone connected to the switch first, not just the computer. Okay, so since we are using the same switch for VLAN 20, let's do the other range, which is the next 5 ports, which is FA06, because we've done 1 to 5 earlier. Now it's 6 to 10. Okay, so let's do the same command, which is switch port mode access, because these are going to be access ports, and then switch port access VLAN number for this is going to be 20 because this is HR department. And don't forget the voice VLAN 40 in here because there's an IP phone connected to this. They're using IP phones in here. Okay, so that's about it so far for the switch configuration. Don't forget to save it by doing the right memory command. Okay, let's move on to our last switch for our VLAN 30 for the IT department, and pretty much the same commands in here. We are just not using IP phones in here, just for example. So first thing that you want to do is to configure the host name. So let's do access switch 2 in here, and then let's do all the VLAN that's needed. In this case, it's VLAN 30 now. It should have the name IT. So let's check if we have created it properly. So now it has the name IT, and now Let's configure the trunk port for this, just the same as the other switch, because it's connected to the trunk port through this gig interface. So let's do and gig 01 in here, and then let's do switch port mode trunk, because it's going to be a trunk port, and then switch port trunk. Let's allow the following VLAN in here. VLAN, oh no, not VLAN 10, VLAN 30 for a VLAN. Okay, so now since we have configured all of the switches, the next step would be to set up static IP address for all of the 5 PCs in here, so we can test and verify their connection on the appropriate VLAN in here. So let's get started with the first PC in here. Just click on this and then go to the desktop tab and then IP configuration, and just set up the IP address. Follow whatever you have put in the label in here. Let's just do 192.168.10.2 in here. Subnet mask will be automatic, and just do the same for the rest of the 4 computers or PCs. Okay, so now that we have IP address and everything is configured, let us test the connectivity and verify if our VLANs are working with the correct configuration. So let's just make sure that the VLAN 10 devices are connected to each other. So we can do that by clicking on the PC and then go to desktop tab and command prompt, and then just ping the other PC on the same VLAN. So let's do 192.168.10.3 to ping this PC1 here. So as you can see, we're getting a response in here, which means that you can ping it. It's pingable. Let us try to ping the PC that's outside of the VLAN in here. So let's ping 192.168.20.20. We're pinging VLAN 20 in here and see if it's communicating. It should fail the ping in here because they're not in the same VLAN and network. Okay, so it failed because they're not on the same VLAN. So let's test the other ones under IT department in here. So let's just ping 192.168.30.3. Let's just make sure that it's not pinging itself. Let's go to config fast ethernet 0. So this is 2.2. So we're pinging .3. Okay, so as you can see, it's pinging now, which is good because it's on the same VLAN. Okay, so let's now do another test to see if we can add another VLAN on this second access switch in here. For example, we want to add another computer in here on this floor, and we want it to be, or like VLAN 20 in here, because HR wants to sit on this floor instead. So let's just connect it to our switch in here, and let's do fast ethernet 06 because as you remember earlier, ports 1 to 5 are already assigned to the IT department. So now let's configure this switch to add another VLAN because we don't have the VLAN 20 yet. So let's just do a VLAN 20, and this is the HR VLAN. So this is just to test if the VLAN can communicate even if it's connected to a different switch. This is to test our trunk ports if they are configured and working properly. Because in here, they were all connected to the same switch. What if it's connected to a different switch? Let's see if they can still communicate. Okay, so now that we have our VLAN for HR, let's just verify if it's there and correct. Show VLAN brief. So we have our VLAN in here. So next thing is to assign the ports into HR VLAN. So for now, since there's just one HR VLAN in there, let's just do FA06. Oops, 6, and then switch port mode access. Switch port access VLAN 20. Also, let's add an IP address for this new PC in here for HR department. Let's just follow the correct network address that we use for the other HR computers, which is 192.168.10.5 4, and let us set up the static IP for this computer. Let's go here, 192.168.10.4. Alright, so as you can see, everything is online now. Let's test if... I'm just gonna add a circle just so we can tell that this is an HR VLAN in here. So let's just ping it and see if it can connect. So let's just do a ping for this computer, 192.168.10.3. Oh, I think I got the wrong IP address in here because we are trying to assign it to HR, and HR is VLAN 20. So let's just fix that and then just do the yellow. Okay, so let's assign the correct IP address in here for the HR network, which is 20.4. I think that's 1 or 3. So let's see if we can ping. Let's just change this to, because it might be confusing later on. So let's just ping. It should be 20, not 10. Okay, so as you can see, it can ping even if it's on a different switch in here. But let's see if we can ping like VLAN 10 in here. Just try that again. VLAN 10, which is the office VLAN or VLAN. So it's failing the ping because it's on a different VLAN, and it should fail. So that's expected with this. But it should ping with the same network if you're trying to ping the other VLAN 20 computers. Okay, so that would be it for our home lab for today's video. We have tackled the concepts of VLANs, access ports, voice ports, and trunk ports. In the next home labs, we are gonna do a DHCP server setup, switch port security, and all the other concepts for layer 2 switching.